everyone, I'm Sophie, apparently, and I hope you're ready to retake the Holy Land because it is a good day for a Crusadia. What you are looking at here is my Crusadia OTK deck that I used to reach Platinum 1 in January. And to clarify, this isn't some clickbait thing where I played like Eldritch up to Plat 2 and then just played a few games with Crusadia to say I got there. No, I played this deck exclusively from Plat 5 to Plat 1, and made it all the way to the top fairly easily in the course of about half a day. So I think Crusadia is an interesting deck in Master Duel, because, as I hope that demonstrates, the deck does have legs, it can win you games pretty effectively, it's easy to play, and it's absolutely dirt cheap. As you can see here, the deck plays a very small number of SRs and URs, and most of them are generic staples that you may already have from other decks, and if you don't, can easily be substituted with other cards. So today, I hope to convince you that Crusadia is a deck you should look into trying out if you're into a deck that can play very fast games, defeat even meta decks if the opponent is unprepared for it, and most importantly, kill your opponent in the most spectacular way possible by dealing 10,000 plus damage in one single attack. So if any of that sounds interesting, stick around and I'll walk you through the deck in detail. I'm gonna go through all the cards, show you the deck's basic combo, and talk through how I think it fits into the meta while we watch some replays. Now, if you aren't familiar with these cards, don't worry. I'm gonna toss my deck list written out up on the screen now. So, if you don't know the names of cards, or you wanna just, pause, take a screenshot, and go build the deck yourself, feel free, I'm gonna leave that there for this entire deck profile to help you follow along. So with that out of the way, we can dig into the meat of this, which is, what does a Crusadia deck do, and how does it do it? Well, as I've alluded to, the deck game plan is very simple. Kill your opponent in one glorious attack, or die trying. The way the deck does this is based around its link monsters. The three important ones are Crusadia Magius, the link 2 Crusadia Regulex, and the link 3 Crusadia Equimax. All of these monsters share the effect that they gain the combined attack of all monsters they point to, but those monsters cannot attack. That's the way this deck tries to OTK, is you want to get monsters in all of the zones of your link, usually gonna be Equimax because he is link 3, so he has the most zones to get buffed from, and then attack with your gigantic guy for game. The links also all have an additional effect. When a monster is summoned to the zone Magius points to, you can add a Crusadia monster from your deck to your hand. Regulex then, similarly, searches a Crusadia spell trap when you summon a monster to its zone, and Equimax, once per turn, can tribute a Crusadia or World Legacy monster it points to negate the effect of a card your opponent controls. And that is a nice effect, but really, the important part about Equimax is not that he's an Omni-negate, it's that again, he has those three arrows. Your boss monster is not here to be a negate. You don't want him on the field on your opponent's turn, because you don't want your opponent to get another turn. Your goal is to go second, make Equimax, and kill your opponent right away with him. Now the way you do that, generally, is by using the Crusadia main deck monsters, all of which can be special summoned in defense position to the zone a link monster points to. This means that, as long as you have any way to get a monster on the field, you can keep extending with everything in your hand, and as long as you have any two monsters you can summon, one Crusadia to normal summon to make Magius, and any other Crusadia or other extender, that is your full combo, all the way to Equimax. Let's go through the card by card so I can explain this in more detail. Starting off, we have 3 Max C and 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, because that's what you do in Master Duel. Then we get into 3 of every main deck Crusadia: Reclusia, Arborea, Leonis, Draco, and Maximus. Of these, Maximus is by far the most important. Maximus lets you target a Crusadia link monster you control, and make it deal double battle damage if it battles an opponent's monster. Maximus is the guy you always want to get into rotation by the end, either by normal summoning it to start your combo and then adding it back to hand later, or by searching it off Magius, because you really want to have this guy's summon available to summon to your Equimax zone to help you OTK. Now, Maximus is your most important OTK tool because it buffs your Equimax up to levels of damage, making you easily clear 8000. But its effect does only double damage if the Equimax battles a monster, not if it attacks directly. This means that, awkwardly, you actually have more trouble OTKing if your opponent passes turn 1 than if they play any monsters. And that can be annoying, but if your opponent's just passing, you're probably gonna win anyway, and you have alright stuff to do on an empty board, so it works out. In terms of the other Crusadias, we have 3 Draco, which, when summoned to a Link Monster zone, add the Crusadia monster from the graveyard to your hand. This is good because you can start your combo by normal summoning Maximus, and then add it back later with a Draco to use Maximus's special summon effect at the end. It also just helps you cover resources in the middle there, and can chain block your Magius, which is often important because you really do need to get that Equimax search. Next up, we have Crusadia Leonis. This is the worst one. It gives the Crusadia Link monster piercing. It comes up occasionally in niche situations, but really you only play him because he's another Crusadia name. Arborea can be banished from the graveyard to prevent a Crusadia monster from being destroyed. This card is very useful at protecting your Equimax if you are forced to not OTK, helps you get through your opponent's turn, and it also has very strong synergy with Crusadia Reclusia, which, when summoned to a Link Monster zone, can target one Crusadia card you control and one card your opponent controls and destroy both. This is both a nice form of spot removal if you have additional extenders, letting you clear out problematic back row before committing to the rest of your plays, but also if you have Arborea and Grave. Arborea can protect the monster on your field you target with Reclusia, letting you get a free pop. So in addition to the Crusadias, there are a couple other monsters that are very important to this deck. One of those is Parallel Exceed. Parallel Exceed works similarly to a Crusadia, in that when you summon a Link monster, you can summon Exceed to its zone, but it has the advantage that it also summons another Parallel Exceed from deck, giving you 2 material at once. That gives you a lot more flexibility, because opening any Crusadia plus Parallel Exceed is 3 material rather than 2, which can get you out of some awkward situations where with some specific combinations, you're forced to use Magius to search your Maximus, but then you're forced to summon Maximus to have a second monster to go into a Link 2. Parallel Exceed alleviates hands like that by giving you 2 material at once, and it also gives you access to Baguska, which is a very powerful play going first, in the unlikely event you need to do so. Finally, in terms of monsters, we have the Kaijus. 3 copies of Ghidorah and 3 Jizukiru. These are very good in this deck because you can summon them to your opponent's field in the zone your Equimax will point to. That means you can buff your Equimax by either 3300 or 2700, in addition to the monsters you summon on your own field, which makes it extremely easy to OTK if your opponent has any other weaker monsters for Equimax to attack. It also guarantees your opponent has an attack position monster if they just set pass, which occasionally happens. I play these kaiju specifically because Ghidorah beats Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, and Jizukiru is the highest attack, making it the best one to summon to your own field if you open 2 kaijus. On that note, it's also worth noting, the kaijus can act as additional extenders if you open 2 of them, because then they do just become free summons from hand rather, to help you Link climb if you don't have enough other extenders. Then we will round out the deck with 10 spells. 3 Desires, it's good card draw and the downside doesn't matter in a deck full of 3-ofs. 2 Lightning Storm because they don't have 3 Lightning Storm. This can be basically any back row removal, you just need ways to clear out traps against decks like Eldritch that you otherwise have difficulty playing through. Then I have 1 Twin Twisters for additional removal as basically the 3rd copy of Lightning Storm, and then the Crusadia back row. The most important one is Crusadia Power, a quick play that lets you target a Crusadia monster and make it unaffected by card effects except its own. This is good for a number of reasons. It can protect your Equimax against infinite impermanence and the like. It can protect your Magius or Regulax or other monsters from negation or removal early in your combo, and you can also search it off Regulax and set it to use on your opponent's turn if you aren't able to OTK. Having something like a Power and an Arborea in graveyard to back up an Equimax makes it pretty easy for you to get through a turn, even if you aren't able to kill turn 1. Speaking of which, the other hedge for that is Crusadia Testament. Testament has two effects. Firstly, you can choose to make it so your opponent cannot activate effects in response to the activation of your Crusadia monster effect this turn. If you happen to hard draw this card, this effect is nice because it prevents things like Ash Blossom from messing up your combo, but what it's really here for is the second effect, which is that if your Crusadia Link monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, Testament can let you draw cards equal to the monster's Link rating. This ends up being pretty nice in hands where you don't quite have enough damage to OTK, because this means you can, with an Equimax, draw 3 cards, which should set you up very nicely for next turn. And finally, the last Crusadia spell is Crusadia Revival. It's a field spell that gives all Crusadia Links 500 attack, and once per turn you can target a Crusadia Link monster, and this turn it can attack all monsters your opponent controls. So the multi-attack effect is good in some niche situations in theory, it's never come up for me, but the real important part of this card is that it gives your Links 500 attack. And that's relevant, because the common situation you end up in is you have your Equimax, you have Maximus in one of its zones, and a Kaiju in the other. Now, Equimax pointing to Maximus is 3600 attack. If it's pointing to a Kaiju, it'll be gaining that Kaiju's attack, so it'll always have 3600 more. But the problem is, even with Maximus's effect, 3600 doubled is only 7200 damage, meaning if your opponent doesn't have another monster, that is not quite enough to OTK. But Revival's 500 attack boost puts Maximus up to 4100, putting it at enough attack points to swing for lethal. So really, this is the card you search in those kind of situations, when you don't think you're gonna need power to defend yourself, and you just need that little extra damage to go for the kill. In the extra deck, we have the one Baguska I mentioned, very good for going first. 2 Magius, you don't need 3, but running 1 means if you get interrupted once, you can't really play the game after that, so I think you want to run 2. Cerberus and Phoenix as generic cards. Pentastag comes up in niche situations when you need piercing, similar to Leonis. 2 Regulax, 1 Track Black. This card's bad and you probably shouldn't play it, but like, sometimes it lets you draw a bunch of cards when you attack with Equimax, and like, it's really funny when it comes up. 1 IP Masquerena, just mainly good for link climbing. 1 Nightmare Unicorn. 2 of the man himself, Equimax. 1 Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax. This is a Crusadia monster. You definitely don't need this card. I didn't actually own it when I played this deck to Platinum. I poured it later and put it in. It is nice in this deck because it's a pretty strong turn 1 play that's hard to remove, and it synergizes with stuff like Arborea and Power and Testament because it is a Crusadia card, meaning this can be a pretty difficult monster to get rid of if you are forced to play a long game, but you really don't need this card. And finally, Access Code Taco. It's access code. You are an OTK deck, you don't normally need the help to get to lethal, but sometimes having this guy around is nice. So that is all the cards in the deck. I've talked some about how it plays, but to give you a clearer picture of what the deck looks like in practice, let me go ahead and show you the deck's main combos. Man, after getting so used to Master Duel over the last few weeks, it feels weird being back on Dueling Book, but we do what we gotta do to be able to show off a combo. This is the deck's basic line you can do with any hand that contains at least 2 Crusadias, in this case Arborea and a Maximus, which I've started out by normal summoning. This is kind of your bread and butter combo you do to OTK or going first to set up a board, so let's go ahead and see how it works. As I said, I've started off with a normal summon of Maximus, and I chose this one as the normal summon for a specific reason. I'm going to turn this into a copy of Magius, and then go ahead and summon out Arborea to its zone. That's going to activate Magius' effect, letting me search out a Crusadia Draco. Now, this is going to show why we summoned the Maximus first. Sending Magius and Arborea will let us go into Regulax and summon out the Draco. That's going to trigger Regulax effect and Draco effect. This lets us add back the Maximus from Graveyard, and because I normal summoned the Maximus at the start, I have not yet used its summon from hand effect, meaning this is going to be available to summon once we go into Equimax. We'll go ahead and pick up the power with the Regulax, and then turn the 2 monsters on field into Equimax. With that done, all we have left to do is to summon Maximus out to its zone, double its damage this turn, and swing into whatever monster our opponent would presumably have if this wasn't the dueling book replay I threw together. So as you can see, the basic combo is very simple. All you need is a normal summon and 1 extender in hand, and you just summon out your guys and go all the way up the chain. Now, obviously this gets a lot stronger with additional cards. If I had a Kaiju, I could summon it here and buff Equimax to ludicrous values. If I open any more Crusadias, I can summon them out at the end, making Equimax even larger and allowing me to play through some disruption. So this is kind of the one and only combo you need to know for the deck. That's one of the nice things about it, is that basically every line starts like this. You do this going second, you can do this going first to set up your Equimax negate, or turn these two into something like an Avramax. So with this combo in mind, that's all you need to know to play the deck, and the other intricacies you can do with additional extenders, you can pretty easily figure out as you go by building off of this basic setup. So now that you're familiar with what Crusadia does, let's go ahead and see it in action. I'm going to show you a couple of replays that show off the deck's OTK power, as well as its ability to have some game against even top-tier strategies. While we do that, I'm going to talk through the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, and how I think it fits into the Master Duel meta. So, let's start off with the positives. Number 1, this deck is very consistent. The fact that you have so much redundancy and any 2 monsters is your full combo to Equimax means that you very infrequently end up with hands you just can't play. Secondly, going second decks, I think, are very good on Master Duel ladder. That's because most decks want to go first anyway, so even if you lose the coin flip, it doesn't really matter. And because it's best of 1, your opponent never gets a chance to mess with you by forcing you to go first. That means you can tech really hard for going second, and almost never need to worry about not being on the draw. Also, if you're playing ladder with this deck, it's good for climbing because it plays very fast games. The fact that you end games in a couple turns at most mean you can jam out a lot of games in the same time it would take to play 1 game with a deck that goes on a 20-minute combo or tries to grind your opponent out, which makes it easier to climb up ranks more efficiently. It's also nice if you happen to roll one of those stupid play solo mode daily quests, cause then you can just OTK your way through the AIs and be done with it. It's also, as I mentioned earlier in this video, relatively simple to play and extremely cheap. The deck requires only a few SRs and almost no mandatory URs. Those cards will make it stronger, and without those you might struggle to climb to higher ranks, but it will certainly get you 2 platinum even without the more expensive cards. If you are interested in a very cheap build, Hard Leg Gaming has a very good video on a build of this deck, playing only 2 SRs total and no URs. I'll put a link to that in the description if you are interested in this super budget build. Although I do think a more optimized deck like this, playing more expensive staples, is gonna be a lot stronger. Now, this deck is pretty strong and very fast, but it's not perfect. Its main weakness is that if your opponent is another blind second deck and they make you go first, you really can't do that much. You can set up something like an Equimax pointing to a monster for a negate, or something like an Avramax setup, but both of those take a lot of resources. And the issue is, if you commit to a line like that, you often don't have enough follow-up to be able to consistently OTK next turn. Also, the fact that you can't kill on an empty board because Maximus's attack doubling doesn't work can put you in some weird situations where your opponent bricking means you lose? And, of course, if you can't OTK, you're stuck with the going first problem where your ending board's not that great. Also, while you do have a lot of extenders and ability to play through disruption, if you don't exactly find kaijus, it can still be hard to play through really big boards. The kaijus enable you to deal with your opponent's strongest negate and guarantee a strong monster for Equimax to point to on your opponent's side, which makes your OTK setups a lot easier. If you don't draw a kaiju, you can still OTK, don't get me wrong, it's just a little more awkward to do. So, with all that in mind, how good is this deck in Master Duel, and is it worth playing? Well, I mean, I got Plat 1 with it, so I think, yeah, it's pretty good. It's definitely good enough to get you 2 Platinum, and I think strong enough to get you even further, potentially. It's definitely not the best deck. If you're interested in the highest win rate deck, this is not going to be it. But if you do like this OTK style and you want some fast games, or you're just looking for a new deck to mix things up that won't break the bank in terms of URs and SRs, I would highly recommend this. It's pretty good, it's very fast, and killing your opponent by dealing, I think the most I've done in one attack is 17,000 damage with an Equimax feels absolutely fantastic. So with that is all I have to say about Crusadia. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, or maybe even subscribe if you're feeling it, I would really appreciate that. Or leave a comment if you have something to comment on, feedback for future videos, or anything you just want to say. So with that, thank you again so much for watching. I'll let these replays finish out. And remember, if you aren't killing your opponent in one attack, why kill your opponent at all?